Welcome back to No Destination. This is episode 9, and today we're diving into another chapter of Late Bloomer and a Wallflower Suit. Each song on this record carries a piece of the story of where I've been, what I've lost, and what I've learned along the way. In this episode, we're going to talk about Gardenia, the second to last song on the record. So settle in, and let's trace the steps back to how I got here. It was deep in the pandemic, late in 2020, I believe, where everyone was locked in. There was very few things you could do. Travel was very limited. This is before vaccines were available and people could travel and do with what they may. There were still a lot of restrictions if you went into certain places. It was a different time, and I think we all have our own memories of that. My wife and I tried to get really creative around some of the things that we did during this period because we couldn't travel as freely as we used to, and the normal things we would do, like go out and eat, were very limited, if not less desirable than they are now because of all the things and concerns and worries and restrictions that were going on in the world. But it was actually her that had this idea to go to Paradise Garden up in Rome, Georgia, and I was not familiar. And so being someone that was kind of trapped in the house, and she said that she had this idea, sure, let's go. Let's do it. And it was a day that really changed me. When I made the Brilliant Mistakes record, Outsiders, I was almost righting the wrongs. I was finishing a chapter that I felt like, or maybe a book of my personal creative life that hadn't been closed. And it was a very personal, it was a friendship thing amongst Chris and I, but it was also like something I had to do for myself. And I thought that was pretty much going to be it. We were still making the record when I visited Paradise Garden. And the trip was really impactful, not only because a song came out of it, which is what we're talking about today, Gardenia, but because it reshaped the way that I thought about my creative life pretty profoundly. So if you don't know already, Paradise Garden is a place that Mr. Finster created, and he was a folk artist. Now, he'd been a lot of things in his life, and again, this is not a historical podcast. So some of these things, this is the way that I remember it. So some of these details could be off. But what I walked away from that experience was that he was someone that had been unsuccessful in many pursuits in his life. A traveling salesperson, a radio show host, a preacher. He seemed to have done all these things in his life, and none of them particularly well, because he kind of bounced between all these jobs. And then one day, he got some paint on his finger. He said he saw something in the paint. I'll let you do the investigation work to figure that out. But what ensued was that moment that he had with the paint on his finger. He painted thousands of paintings from that point to the end of his life. Thousands. And as I understand it, when he had this moment, he was like in his mid to late 50s, I believe. And so how this shaped my experience was, here I was, back in the creative seat again, with the pen, with the guitar, with the band. And I thought I was just putting a bow on that part of my life, and that I had moved on in a lot of ways, and that this was just to cross the T's and dot the I's that I had been unable to do before with previous creative projects. Like, this was just a way to put a better period to that creative sentence or chapter in my life. And when you're walking through this, basically what amounts to somebody's yard. Now, it's a pretty big yard that he had, this Paradise Garden. And you see all these things that he had put together. And what dawned on me is that he had all this creativity later in life, like past the halfway point to the end of his life. There were some famous bands that used his art, Talking Heads, REM, for example. So he had gotten notoriety. This isn't someone who was just a no one. He's a very popular folk artist who had really gotten a lot of acclaim during that period because of, don't want to say the counterculture, but bands that were cool were using his artwork. So I think he got a lot more notoriety than he would have otherwise. But it was this notion that somebody could reinvent themselves at some point in their life that seemed like a time where a lot of other people were settling down. And that's the way I felt, because when I was writing those songs for outsiders, whether it was trying to finish the ones that I had left halfway done or write new ones, I felt like I was getting a creative second wind. Like this time it felt different. I felt grounded. My reasoning seemed more solid. This wasn't for any other purpose but than to express myself. Even though that's the way it always had been, I guess when you're a younger person, there's always this thing in the back of your head, well, what if we get found? What if we take off, right? You still dream a little bit bigger when there's a lot more road ahead of you than behind, at least when you look in terms of age. But here's someone who had radically redefined themselves at a point when in America, most people are starting to retire. And he had found his calling. He'd found his voice. He'd found the thing that he could do that brought people the most joy. And so as I thought about my own experience as a creative person, it was just kind of this eureka moment of why not? Why can't you reinvent yourself at any point? Why can't you just become whatever it is that you want to become at any point? It's not really about how old you are. It's about your ideas. It's the stories that you tell yourself and the stories that you tell other people about what you're doing. And so I felt really inspired visiting Paradise Garden. And it's going to sound hokey, and you may not believe it, but it gave me permission to be free with my creative self. That wasn't something limited to a younger version of Dylan. That I could be whoever I wanted to be whenever I wanted to be it. Now, I'm not a painter, right? I don't think I'm making album covers anytime soon. But if the reasoning that I got into music was to express myself and to share that with others, then why has that changed? Why is that different than when I originally started? The truth is, it's not any different. Here was this guy who had done all these things, and he had completely reinvented himself. And it gave me permission that, hey, dummy, meaning me, you can be whatever you want to be. This is your life. Don't spend it living someone else's version of that. Be weird. And I'd reached some success professionally. And I struggled with that because I fought really hard because I dropped out of high school, dropped out of college. I always felt like I have imposter syndrome. I would walk into these boardrooms, I'd be in these meetings where I was asked to give my opinion about things, or I would be making decisions. And in my head, I'm like, how in the hell did I get here? Why are they listening to me? Now, there's reasons why they were, I'm sure. But it never really felt like me. And in a way, I felt like Finster. I felt like I was just selling things out of my trunk. I felt like I was just going from town to town trying to figure out what would stick. And it just so happened that I got good at something professionally for a period of time. All those things resonated with me. Now, the religious message didn't resonate with me personally. That is, his message, why he was painting was for God. That didn't resonate with me. But it was the permission that somebody could reinvent themselves at a much different time than I'd ever given it credit for. And that's where I decided that I'm never going to stop playing music again. I do love these definitive beginning and endings of things. And maybe it's because I'm autistic or I have ADD or I have some kind of abbreviation that I'm not aware of yet. But I don't love being anything for too long. I love for things to have a beginning and an end. And that feels good for me. So the creative thing is one, I've enjoyed making a lot of records, playing a lot of shows. And then there being a period where I go be a person, I go be in the audience more, I can be inspired. I don't have the weight of trying to be a creative person. Like I want to consume more things. Because when I write, and especially when I record, I don't listen to hardly any music. I don't know why that is. It's a subconscious thing. I remember having a conversation with Andy about this when we were recording the record. But I remarked how little music I was actually listening to while making the record. And, what I walked away from that conversation is he does something similar. I think the other musicians I've spoken with as well, it's kind of normal to try to tune that radio out, the cultural radio for anything. So I read a lot, audiobooks, podcast, but not a lot of music. But this time I wasn't going to stop because I didn't need to. Because I could hold a couple of thoughts in my head. I could be someone that has a career, as crazy as that is. And for all those folks that are younger listening to this, wondering when you're driving through a neighborhood, what do all these people do for a living to live in this house? I still wonder that. I still wonder how I've arrived at this point in my life. So I had this moment in Paradise Garden where I felt like I could see him and then I could see me, and it all made sense that I didn't have to be a thing anymore. And I also believe in the power of saying things out loud. And if you tell people you're a runner just because you ran a mile yesterday, and it's the first time you've run in 6 years, there's no distance that you need to achieve before you're actually a runner. You've done a thing, and since you did it, you're now a runner. And I was writing music. I was playing music. I was a musician. Then, boom. The other thing that this inspired was a song. Song 9 on Late Bloomer in a Wallflower Suit. Titled it Gardenia. When I brought this to Brilliant Mistakes, it had a much different sonic foundation. It actually sounded a little bit like a Motown song, if you could believe it. It still had all the weird chords and stuff, but it was definitely a different vibe. And so we talked a little bit in the Good Trouble episode about how Good Trouble and Gardenia, there was this searching for a certain sound that we had not found yet, Michael and I. And this was one of those that was the most true of. It just had this different feel, didn't have the quality that I was looking for. Andy did a great job peeling back the layers of the song and making sure that the core of the song, Gardenia, came through. What I found out as a musician is a lot of the problem was in my rhythm guitar playing. I'm a very heavy rhythm guitar player. And so a lot of what's happening with how I strum should go to the drums or should go to some other instrument. But for everything to find a place, I can't keep doing what I'm doing and then everybody have space to do their thing. So he kind of deconstructed the rhythm guitar part, and instead of being the syncopated part, it was just more straight eighth notes. And that was a revelation. And at the end, there's this weird thing melodically that happens where it's not like a outro, a refrain, but it's this part that repeats. And we'd done all the tracking. So we'd done the acoustic guitar, the drums, the vocals. And we knew that this moment needed to elevate from everything else in the song. And so Andy had the idea to put it straight through the board. And we made it sound really blown out guitar tone wise. And so it's not a fuzz pedal. That's just through like an analog channel strip in the board. It's not run through a guitar amp. And that's Michael Cotter playing that outro. And what I thought about when I heard that was the Stooges. And so that's why you get the piano part, because it sounded like a Stooges song to me. And again, there was moments where hearing Pulaski back for the first time in the control room and hearing the vocals open up in the chorus, having people get really creative with Good Trouble and it coming alive. Gardenia was one of those moments making this record where every moment was building confidence. And, it was affirmation that we were on the right path. And so even though it's like this brooding, minor sounding song, the fact that it kind of become this other thing at the very end. I mean, I love the Stooges, but I don't know if anybody wants to hear me do my version of the Stooges for 3 or 4 minutes. But to do that in the outro was a ton of fun. And that's what it's a nod to, is those early Stooges records. And the inspiration for this song was really about combining what I learned to be Finster's story and just like these vignettes. So kind of like Good Trouble, there was these like verses that had sections of emotion, and then the chorus is kind of telling you the story about Finster. So the first verse: we went walking in Gardenia, a world outside Desolation Row, and time went by with no concern, just strangers with no place to go. Setting the stage, as the kids would say. And then there's this idea, because Finster pulls on so much religious imagery, which was very prevalent in the paintings, the descriptions of the paintings that you could see if you go to Paradise Garden. The chorus is: the devil inside tells me I cast shadows out in the sunshine. Mr. Finster painted for God. People like us, we sing songs on the outside of Gardenia. So it's combining these ideas that, you could use the angel devil analogy on your shoulders, but the devil inside me tells me that I cast shadows. That doubt, it's that whatever internal voice that you hear sometimes that's not as productive or encouraging. That's the thing that I fight from time to time, is that, imposter syndrome, that self-doubt. But here's Mr. Finster, and he painted for God. But then it was drawing that line in the sand that people like us, we sing songs on the outside of Gardenia. So Gardenia was kind of this reframing of Paradise Garden, in my mind. And then we get to the next verse. A running rose breaks free. And let's pause right there. There's a song on a record that I made called The Nightbirds Revolt that came out at the very end of 2007, beginning of 2008. And there's a song on there called A Running Rose. And I've used this a couple of times. And I've told you I don't want to dig into a ton of the lyrics, like breaking down what every line means, because it means something to me. I wrote it, right? But this Running Rose piece holds a special place in my heart. Now, in Pulaski, I told you the original draft of that song was inspired by my Nana Jane, my great aunt. At her funeral, the preacher was giving a sermon at her funeral. My interpretation, or what my memory of that sermon was, is it was something to the analogy of breaking through to heaven was like a running rose on the other side. And so this idea was actually from a piece of that service. And that running rose imagery has always just kind of stuck in the back of my head, which another thing, give it for what it's worth, Adam Duritz at the Counting Crows. Now, despite what you may think about his hair and now lack thereof, he was Sideshow Bob for a while. But there's a song lyric, there's a piece of Maria in every song that I sing. And that's an interesting idea, because I think what he's telling the listener is that there's this piece of someone, and kind of everything I do as it pertains to this or when I do this. And I don't know if that's necessarily true for everybody, but you have to write what you know. And what I know is my own life experience. And this is just a piece for me that I put in the song that is meaningful to me, a running rose. So this idea that a running rose breaks free through the darkened city streets. We missed the train and laughed, discovering constellations with our hands. The chorus again. The devil inside tells me I cast shadows out in the sunshine. Mr. Finster painted for God, and people like us, we sing songs on the outside of Gardenia. And then we have this, what I refer to as the Stooges outro. Everywhere I go, I hear trains, maybe longer, but I could have swore everywhere I lived, it was like near a train track. Like it wasn't something I was seeking out, but I'd move in and I'd be sitting in the living room or wherever, and I'd hear the train. Now, my grandfather was obsessed with trains. He had a whole model train, like city, in his basement. But I've met other people in my life that have said the same thing. And one of them is Chris, who was a part when I was writing these songs, and he was in Brilliant Mistakes. And I said that to him, and he was like, oh, yeah. And the same was true for him. So I don't think I'm crazy, or maybe I am crazy, and he was just trying to make me feel not as crazy, which could be true too. But anyway, everywhere I go, I hear trains, and a heart that's open ain't afraid to change. And then it repeats twice. And so that last part is, I'll leave that for interpretation, but especially that last line. That's me talking to myself and being completely inspired by this moment in Paradise Garden, by this guy who didn't live too far from where I live now, completely reinventing himself. So this idea that a heart that's open ain't afraid to change. And so how can I keep myself open? How can I allow myself to move through the world in a way where I can become who I'm supposed to be, right? And I think that's to be open, to feel things, to allow myself to be who I am. This song encapsulates so much of what late bloomer in a wallflower suit is all about. Truly. It's about someone who always felt like music was their thing. Always. I got a guitar when I was in 4th grade. I wrote an album. Now, it was a lot of rip-off of Cracker songs, which is hysterical because I was 10. And Cracker, it was a band started by the guys from Camper Van Beethoven, but they had a AAA radio hit, a couple of them actually in the mid-90s, which I thought was really cool. And that just shows you where Dylan was that I was really into bands like Cracker. But, I was 4th grade. I made a little record cover in my composition notebook. I had the track listing figured out. First song I wrote was called I Love You So. I did not know how to play the guitar. But when I held a guitar, I felt like me. And I think that's what we're all searching for in this world, is we're searching for our thing, whether it's a camera, whether it's rescuing animals, whether it's fishing, playing music, running. We just want to find things that make us feel like us. And the time where I feel the most like myself is when I'm creating, writing, playing music. In Late Bloomer in a Wallflower Suit, from the title to Gardenia to a lot of the songs on it, is me welcoming myself to this part of my journey and letting other people into that. And if this chapter does nothing else in my life, I hope it inspires other people to be that version of themselves. Join a running club. Take a photography class. It's never too late to be something. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. Listen, I've been that person who gets to a certain point in life. You're like, well, I guess I need to grow up now. That's a sham. That's what they want you to think. They want you to pay your taxes. They want you to be in the system. Capitalism doesn't want people who are content. And I'll spare you the rant on that. So to that kid who dropped out of high school, dropped out of college, who also dropped out of music because it was important to be a dad in a season where I was a single dad and I didn't want the weight of passing down generational mistakes. I could tell you, I've tried to play the game, and that's just what it is. It's a game. I worked the same job for 10 years, moved up the ladder, got to a point where I was in charge of a lot of different things. We got bought by a private equity firm. They messed up with a lot of the money stuff. I got a phone call. Actually, this is bringing back a ton of memories because I didn't expect to talk about this, but we were working on this next batch of songs. This was 2022. So we were working on what was going to be Late Bloomer and Wallflower Suit, but just starting to demo these songs out. And I got a call from my boss on a Thursday night. I was at band practice. Excuse myself, because nothing's heavier to a band rehearsal than, your boss calling you. So I'll remove myself from the conversation. But he said, I've got bad news. Everyone in the company is going to get an email first thing in the morning. Again, this is a Thursday night. That everybody is being let go and they're not getting their paycheck tomorrow. So I played the game. I did all the things you're supposed to do. I climbed the ladder. I did it with integrity. I put a lot of my stuff on hold because I thought that's what you did. You give it to the company, right? You do all those things. And everybody lost their job to no fault of their own. Now, you can insert, you probably have personal stories about people you know, or maybe companies you worked for during COVID who went through something similar. This was not unique to the company that I worked with at the time. But it was this other reinforcing thing. So I got employed again, just like everybody else. You move on to the next job, hopefully. But you can do everything right and it still not work out. And I believe with every fiber of my being, you only get one shot. Do you want to get to the end of that and say, I made mistakes, but I did the best with what I could. I lived the life that I wanted to live. That's all we can hope for. And so in that moment of being told that, hey, everybody's losing their job, hey, you're also not getting your paycheck for the last 2 weeks or this week, and I'm writing all these songs about finding my creative self, it was kind of this weird 180 moment where I was like, wait a second. I thought all us adults had it figured out. I thought if we just did a good job and showed up and did everything. And that's part of it. And the message here isn't to quit your job and not play the game. You got to. That's why when you drive around the neighborhoods, everybody's got a job. As I was writing about all these songs that are on Late Bloomer and Wallflower Suit, about finding myself, about becoming myself as a creative person in this chapter of my life, it was one more reinforcement about you just can't control anything. You can't control life. So what you can control is how you spend your time. And I was the guy, when I worked that job, I was on a plane 3 to 4 weeks a month, some months. I was away from home. Up until COVID, I was traveling all the time. I thought that's what I had to do. And if you're doing that right now and you somehow think that I'm telling you things only to you and that you should reconsider your entire life plan, that's not what I'm saying. Because I do think you could do both. And I was doing both successfully. I was in a band and I was doing my day job and I was having a lot of fun. But a job is just a job. A job is not your family. And a career is not your family. It's important to me now to understand that this is just a part of my life. This is who I am. I play music. Just like I have family obligations, I have obligations to friends, I have obligations to work. That's no different than when I was 20. If I couldn't get somebody to swap schedules with me, I couldn't get off to go play a show, even though my job was not very important then. Not much has changed. I'll leave you with this. The fear is not that we don't find our calling. The fear is that we put that off for so long that we only get to enjoy it for a short period of time. So I hope whatever you do that fills your cup up, you find it now. You find it soon. And if you haven't found it, you keep looking. You go to your friends to go do line dancing. You go take a city walking tour. You go to a museum. You take a class. You go to a concert. Whatever it is. Because when you find what it is that you're supposed to be doing in that season of your life, you feel alive. And when you feel alive, there's nothing else that replaces that. Whether it's a relationship, when you find that person that you're supposed to be with, nothing feels better than that. When you find a group of people to play music with that it feels special with, nothing replaces that. Just like if you find a great job that you're passionate about and it makes you not want to poke your eyes out at lunchtime. Or when you wake up, call out sick to work. Go find whatever it is. Don't put that on hold. Because your career, when it ever comes time for your number to be expendable, you will be. And we see that in crazy schemes like insurance, health insurance. I mean, all of us know someone who's had to fight the insurance company, right? It's a pyramid scheme, y'all. And I'm saying just live your life. I don't have regrets about working really hard. I've never been afraid of work. I've worked since I was 14. What I have regrets on is that I thought I couldn't be my complete self. So I ask you today, do you feel like that about yourself? Are you living a life that you feel is your true and authentic life? Do you feel like whatever you're about to go do today is exactly what you want to be doing? And if the answer is no, my friends, you can still reinvent yourself. Finster did it in his 50s, late 50s, I think. And if you're in your 60s or 70s and you're listening to it, imagine how much better your story is going to be compared to Finster. You gave up even more runway to go do something great, something that made you happy. And there's not a measurable thing that you have to put on that. Doesn't have to make money. Does it make you happy? Does it inspire you? Does it make you want to get up in the morning? Do you feel more like yourself when you do that thing? When you find the right person, all of a sudden you feel better about yourself. You're more successful because you have a better foundation. There's more stability. This is your life. Don't settle. If you're in a season where you're not fired up and passionate about something, keep going. This is your life. This is your friend Dylan telling you, you've got this. Even if you're 40 or 50 or 60 or 70, or 80 or 90. Who cares? Because if you do those things that mean the most to you, that time will be well spent. Doesn't matter if we live to be 100 years old if we were miserable doing it. So whether we live to be 70, 80, whatever, a heart that's open ain't afraid to change. I'm not, and I hope you're not. This has been the No Destination Podcast. Until next time.